Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Matt, I am the American-Canadian Gamer, and welcome to the first video in a series where I discuss what I want to see from Halo 5. Now, you could kind of call this like a Halo 5 wishlist kind of thing, but I want to go into really good detail and really talk about things that I think would benefit the game overall, and not just talk about stuff that I think would be cool, which I may get to that eventually. I may have just a small video that talks about that kind of stuff, but I really do want to discuss things I think are important to the Halo sandbox, important to the franchise, and just talk about things that could overall be a major benefit to the series. And today, we're going to start with something that is not going to be controversial in any way, shape, or form with the current Halo 4 fan base and most of you guys. Today, we're going to talk about removing Sprint. This is going to be fun. I can see the hate already, but I have my flame shield up, and I have really good reasons for what I want to say. I don't always have the most popular opinion, but I always have reasons, so at least hear me out on what I want to say. So, this may come as a surprise to a lot of you, because sprinting in Halo is something that I have always enjoyed, and I've proclaimed on more than one occasion how much I really like sprinting, how much I like moving fast. Like, I love Quake, I love playing a scout and a soldier in Team Fortress 2, because I love high mobility, I love that. And I do like sprinting in Halo, it's enjoyable for me. But when I actually sat down and thought about it and looked at the big picture of the game and not just my enjoyment, I decided that Halo is much better off without Sprint for a few reasons. So the first one that I want to get at is just kind of talking about the game in general, the overall play style of the game. Halo's a very methodical and a very mental game. It's all about holding power positions, controlling power weapons, and team communication. All of those are necessary for a team to perform at its utmost effectiveness. And adding Sprint to the game removed a lot of those elements of the game, and we saw that in Halo Reach. This isn't something that was caused by loadouts. Loadouts are not the root of this. We saw this happen in Halo Reach's competitive play. Sprint was implemented, and it was actually eventually removed from the competitive side of Halo Reach because of the negative impact that it actually had on the game. And what it did was it turned Halo from that methodical game, that power position game, into a cat-and-mouse style game. And if you follow Naked Eli, you've probably heard him mention this before, and he's the one that kind of opened me up to this idea. And he's very right. Halo does become a cat-and-mouse style game when you add Sprint to it, because when someone kills you, you can call out, oh, there's a one-shot on my X, or there's a guy on my X with this. By that point that you've said that, he's already sprinted away. And yes, people could always move away from X's in Halo, but when you can sprint away, that's a lot different, because sprinting is a lot faster, and it makes it much harder to identify or predict where the target may have moved to. Because when that person can sprint, he could have gone anywhere. He could have looped around into any direction, and that's a lot harder to predict. And games are, especially competitive FPS, are mostly about prediction. A lot of prediction is one of the main elements of a competitive shooter. And that was a big thing that turned that around was, oh, now you have to chase the person down. And granted, that effect is compounded by loadouts, because now not only can you sprint, but you can spawn with all the equipment that you need for a standard engagement. So now instead of, oh, move to this position, guard this position, hold it, or take it, or fight for it, it turns into, oh, I got killed, let me respawn and chase down someone else, or chase down the guy that just killed me. And instead of the game revolving around holding positions and controlling weapons, it comes down to players poking at each other until one either gets forced into combat, or both players just for some reason decide to commit to the fight. It's a lot more chasing, a lot more searching, and a lot less fighting. It's really weird how that happened, and that cat and mouse effect has actually slowed the game down. It's really weird how Halo just had that right mix of elements to have something like Sprint slow the game down, because we see a lot of shooters like Quake that are really all about high movement and very fast movement, but those games are built around that. They're built with that in mind. Halo was never built with that in mind, and adding Sprint actually slowed the game down. It had the opposite effect that it was intended to have. Another negative impact that it had on the game was that it increased the map size. Now, that's pretty sound logic that's hard to argue against. 343 said, okay, players can move faster, they can move further, therefore we should make the maps larger to accommodate for that. It's sound logic it's hard to argue against, but it negatively impacted Halo based on the systems that it had previously implemented, mainly with rifles. Rifles like the battle rifle and the DMR became much more powerful than before. Now granted, rifles were always really good. The battle rifle was always a really good weapon to have in Halo 3. In Halo Reach, the DMR was a really good weapon to have, but that was in an arena sandbox where weapons are meant to be balanced a little differently. That was not a loadout setup. With the loadouts, rifles became incredibly powerful because you would always have one, and the sightlines benefited it, and the map size benefited it. It was always really, really good to have a rifle. And not taking a rifle would have a negative impact on your overall performance. Maybe you wouldn't do bad, but you wouldn't do as good as you would have if you had taken a rifle. And it made loadouts go from, oh, hey, look, you can play the way you want, to, well, you can play the way you want, but you may suffer for it. Now, these weapon imbalances were made even worse by another effect of adding sprint as a default ability for Halo, an increase in the motion sensor range. Now, once again, this is pretty sound logic that's hard to argue against. Players can move faster, therefore maybe we should increase the motion sensor range. It's sound logic, and it's easy to see why it was done. But it had another negative impact on the game, and it made some of the weapons even less effective than they were before, and made rifles much more superior and the best weapons to use in the game. Now, the default motion sensor range in Halo 4 is 40 meters. To put that in perspective, let's compare that to the Halo 3 motion sensor, which was only 25 meters. So you can see that there's a 15-meter difference between the Halo 3 and Halo 4 motion sensor. Now, let's look at the assault rifle. The assault rifle in Halo 4 has the best red reticle range out of all of the automatics, and its red reticle range is only 24.5 meters. That means that with any automatic loadout weapon in Halo 4, you are on the motion sensor long before your weapon is at its optimum effectiveness. This again gives rifles a massive advantage. As soon as you're on their motion sensor, they can take shots at you, and you are not within range to fight back. Now, a lot of problems in Halo 4 can be traced back to the addition of sprint, and removing loadouts won't fix these. We saw these negative impacts take hold in Halo Reach's competitive play, so we know that even in an arena sandbox, sprint has a negative impact on the game. And if I'm going to be completely honest about something, I actually think loadouts can work in Halo 5 if they remove sprint. I actually think loadouts would be very effective and be very fun if sprint was removed. Now, granted, there's a lot of problems the current loadout system has, and we're going to get to those in another video, but I honestly do think that loadouts in Halo could work if they retweak the system and remove sprint. I think that there's a lot of room in the sandbox to have a lot of weapons and give players ways to play, but I think adding sprint, making the maps bigger, and making the motion sensor much larger really force players, at least to play optimally, to use rifles like DMRs and battle rifles, and really limited the loadout system. I think it had a lot of negative impacts on the loadout system, and I think a lot of problems we do see are easily traced back to sprint, not loadouts, and not a lot of other things people like to point at immediately when they talk about things they don't like about Halo 4. And I'm not gonna lie, I would really hate to see sprint go, just personally, because I like moving fast, I like sprinting, I like that capability, and it's fun to use, it's really fun. But the enjoyment that sprint brings on an individual level is not worth the overall negative impact that it has on the game and on the sandbox. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, all of the reasons why I think that sprint should be removed from Halo altogether. Not just as a default ability, but completely removed from the game. It just has too many negative impacts. It, like I said, increases motion sensor, increases map size, and completely throws out a lot of the balances of the game. Now, I know this is somewhat of a controversial subject to talk about within the Halo series, especially on the forums. People don't like to discuss this because it's always a flame war. Somebody says remove it, others say keep it, and then everyone just argues, and I know a lot of people here probably have a lot of opinions about removing sprint from Halo. So, down in the comments section below, let me know. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? Do you just partially agree or partially disagree? Is there something that I missed altogether? I'm interested in having a conversation about it down in the comments, and maybe we'll see a follow-up to these videos if I get enough engagement from you guys and it warrants having another video. Now, if you did enjoy this video, then be sure to stick around because I do have a lot planned for the future. I want to talk about loadouts, talk about weapons, talk about all sorts of other things that I think Halo could really benefit from changing, improving, or removing, and just make Halo 5 the best game possible. I know a lot of you here are really die-hard Halo fans. You really love the game. You love the series. A lot of us are disappointed. Some of us like things they did in Halo 4. Some of us like things that they did in past Halos. And I just want Halo 5 to be the best game that it can possibly be. And Halo 4 had a lot of problems, but it did a lot of things right, and I think it would be stupid to ignore a lot of things they did in Halo 4, and I want to talk about a lot of stuff in the upcoming weeks, so stick around. I think you're really going to enjoy it. As always, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. My name is Matt, and I'll see you next time.